All right, so in today's YouTube video, we are going to be going over my client David Lynch's powerlifting programming. We're going to be going over squat, bench, deadlift, some of the things that we've been implementing in his training more recently. And of those things, what has gone well, what has not gone well, and then we will be problem solving, and I'll be writing his new block completely live so that you guys can kind of follow along and see where my thought process lies. So, for starters, just a little bit about David. We've been working together now for about a year. We have, well, a little more than a year now. We have a lot of training data, a lot of success together. He's a 2 times a week squatter, 3 times a week bench presser, and 2 times a week deadlifter, with recently moving to sumo deadlift. We've been playing around some sumo deadlift, so we'll get into some of that. Now, more info about his previous block. With bench press, we just came off a very, very good block. After listening in on a conversation between a few friends of mine, Andrew Salient and Madison Frazier, I had a little bit of inspiration to make some programming adjustments with his bench press, notably to his total rep per set count that we were doing across the week, just his average reps per set count, and we made some adjustments to that, and as well as just adding in some more pressing accessory work in general, which I'll get into. And we just came off the best block of bench we've ever had. Bench has been the one lift that's been very up and down. As you'll see, David's not naturally super well leveraged for bench press, so it's the one lift that technically has maybe been a bit of a problem to really nail down until recently, as well as programming wise has been difficult to really pick up a lot of momentum and a lot of predictability until this last block or two, really. So we just came off a very good bench press block where we hit an all-time PR. We added like 20 pounds to his bench press within one block. His squat has really probably been his best lift, and I guess maybe most predictable lift over our time working together. But recently we've been running into some knee pain, which we believe has been caused from switching over from conventional deadlift to sumo deadlift. So we've been dealing with some knee pain, dealing with some back discomfort, just some general things going on that have hindered his squat. So we'll kind of get into how we plan on managing his knee pain and managing his squat training moving forward. And then with his deadlift, David historically has been a conventional deadlifter, like a 1 time a week deadlifter, maybe a second day that's some RDL or maybe some light pulls from the floor if we feel like we need some practice. But generally, he's been like a 1 primary day conventional puller. It's been conventional for a majority of our time together. But recently, after his most recent meet, we've made the switch over to sumo deadlift. And with that change, we naturally started off 1 time a week sumo, 1 time a week conventional, kind of let the two go against each other. And as we feel like we've seen some promise with his sumo deadlift and some potential with that, possibly being stronger than his conventional, we've made the switch over to sumo twice a week. But with that change, we've started to run into some knee, with the knee pain again that's hindered his squat. We believe some of that may be caused by some sumo deadlift. So we're going to go into all the changes that I plan on making with his squat, his bench, and his deadlift. And I'm basically just going to be writing his program here for you guys to follow along, so you can see what goes into writing a client's programming. Okay, so before we start on the programming side of things, I want to go over David's lifts just so you guys have a general idea of kind of what his technique looks like, and we can just talk about just in general what we're kind of looking at here. So with David's bench, this is actually his most recent bench PR here. First two reds. Very, very clean rep here. This kind of caught us off guard. The previous week, he had hit 250, which was a 5-pound bench PR, and he came back and hit 265 the next week to basically add 20 pounds across his block. So pretty grindy here. I mean, this is an RPE 10 for sure, but really, really good pause. That was something we've been super stoked about. Is the biggest thing we've been working on with David's bench that really relies on his bench performance is his pause. If he does a really good job of controlling that bar into the chest, does a really good job of pausing that bar softly on the chest, he's bound to have a really good bench here. So very smooth single here. I mean, very hard, but this is huge for us. I know this has been something we've been really working at for a long time now, so super stoked about that. With David's deadlift, just so you can get an idea of what a sumo deadlift looks like here. Relatively new to sumo again. Biggest things we've been working on is just really having a good hinge and starting that weight more bias on his heels. And then as he's pulling, shifting that weight forward during the wedge portion to get on the midfoot. And then kind of just being a little bit more patient off the floor. A problem we've been running into a little bit is he tends to maybe rush a little off the floor, maybe try to pull the bar too quickly off the floor, and that has kind of maybe caused some positional issues. But we really cleaned this up a lot. He's done a really good job executing his deadlift lately, especially with only pulling sumo over the last 2-3 months, maybe. And then with his squat here, this is similar to his bench press, where we really prioritize that bottom position. We really prioritize general control, and you're going to see we do a good amount of pause squats, and we'll get into it, but I believe we're going to probably add some more pause squats. So that'll be something we'll kind of touch on. But David really relies a lot on like a good, just solid descent and solid kind of control in the bottom. Sometimes one of the issues we'd see is if he hits the hole a little bit too hard or out of position, we're going to see a lot of times this kind of chest dip forward, even more so here, and the hips really want to shoot back. He's doing a really good job here, though, kind of controlling everything. So that is where his technique is. And now we will jump into his current programming. Now, this is David's programming from not this previous block, but the block before that. So mostly I want you guys to look at his bench press. That's really what I'm going to be talking about here, because I want to detail the changes we made bench press from this previous block to last block. And then we'll kind of get into what last block all three lifts entailed, and then we'll get into his current programming as I write that. So the biggest thing you'll see, we see a lot of sets of 4 to 5 here, working sets. We see some 5s and 6s. We have a little bit of a primer single here. We have just a top double, triples, 4s. But you'll see generally some lower rep ranges. And then we have some weighted dips here and machine chest press here. So the biggest changes we made going into this next block is, the first thing is I ticked a lot of his reps down. A lot of those working sets of 5 and 6, I made 4s and 5s. And then I also added in just generally more pressing volume, more accessory volume. So we'll start off here with this bench day. Again, this was 4s and 5s. Ticked it down to 3s and 4s. Just generally a little bit less workload here. And the reason being is David has a very long range of motion. So he's not going to be as good and be able to work in his high percentages with those higher reps. And you can see it in his training. As he's working through like maybe a set of 5, that barbell is moving very, very quickly until it gets to a dead stop. It looks like RPE 6 on rep 4, and then rep 5 turns into an RPE 9 or 10. And again, that's just due to his build and his long range of motion. So we really started leaning into these lower rep ranges here. Again, this was all kind of inspired. This is maybe a concept I use more with squat and deadlift, but a lot of this conversation was inspired by Andrew and Madison's conversation that I kind of was listening in on. So again, dropped a lot of rep ranges here. I really don't have any clients right now on bench press doing working sets of 2 and 3, but David's an exception. Again, very long range of motion, so we really worked through these low rep ranges this last block. And even his tertiary day, where I typically would leave a little bit more rep work in, dropped that down, kept the RP fairly low across the block, and then just kind of leading in with a primer single has been huge for us. I guess the reasoning behind the primer single is we get to see, one, like I mentioned, control is huge for him. We see a lot of control, but we're able to load the barbell. So we're controlling that descent. When we can control the descent, it leads to a good pause. That's kind of going to constrain him. Going into his primary day, we can have a really quality session here with a lot of quality sets, quality reps, leading into this primary day. Again, we're just trying to induce a lot of stress here, but in general, lower rep ranges. That's the first thing I wanted to point out. Set count stays identical, and actually the percent drop stayed identical, aside from the fact that it's just less reps. The other thing we did is we added in a good amount of pressing volume, and this change was more sparked from the fact that when I was talking to David about our rep, possibly changing maybe some of the rep schemes a little bit more than we have, and just mentioning, hey, this is kind of the plan I want to move towards next block. This is kind of my ideas I'm formulating right now. I had asked him, I said, do you ever feel like you're fatigued in your chest? Do you ever feel very sore in the chest or in the shoulders? And he had said, no, I never really feel beat up. I'm never really feeling sore, which tells me we can do more workload. Now, I didn't really want to push that workload through bench press. Again, just because we were already kind of making some changes to his comp bench, as well as the fact that very long range of motion, doesn't soak up like a ton of volume well, like we've seen. He doesn't do a ton of sets here, and only is benching 3 days a week. So we leaned into more accessory work. I added a set of machine chest press here. I added a set of weighted dips here, basically a second top set of weighted dips. Kept the back downs in as well, and we saw bench take off. Across the block, entire time he's telling me he's feeling very, very strong. We see basically double 225, or sorry, this is the wrong block here. We see single starting off with 230, basically the same start point as his double with 225. So we're starting off pretty much where we would expect. And then he takes 235 the next week. Again, not a ton of, I guess, juice early on in the block. He's even telling me not feeling super strong. But then we see 250 go down, 15-pound jump. This is a PR for him. And then we see 264. First two reds, big time bench PR. This is a huge set for him, like we'd seen in that video there. And across the block, we're just seeing a lot of really quality bench sessions here. 237 for 3, which is basically where I had his general range planned out. We see 230 for 3 here, so that's a pretty big jump for him on that secondary day as well. So we're seeing a lot of improvements with his bench press very quickly, really through weeks 3 and 4. You could tell it took weeks 1 and 2 to really kind of get into the structure, and then the adaptations really take over, and we get weeks 3 through 4 really take off. Now looking at his squat and deadlift training. So this block we were doing, we were kind of setting his deadlift up in a way so that we could pit the two against each other. So we had sumo on his primary day and then conventional on the secondary day. Now we were doing top sets on both. I even had a single here, and then back down. So they're very similar days, in a pretty aggressive protocol. Looking back, we probably could have got away with maybe an easier conventional day here. But the biggest thing David was telling me was that he felt clunky. His technique felt out of practice, and we could see it a little bit. And there were some, we were only getting one with starting in sumo, being very new to sumo. We were really only getting 1 day a week to practice the movement. So my thought was, okay, let's add a second day in, and I just made it easy ascending pause deadlift and percent base. So it's just all pre-prescribed loads, right? Everything's just completely closed off, where no open-ended load selection. It's just purely I'm prescribing numbers for him, and he's taking those, and they're very, very light. Again, this says at 7. It was coming in closer to a 6. Very submaximal, very easy, which is what we wanted. We didn't want it super heavy, and we kind of just saw deadlift not really pick back up. Technically, maybe things were looking better, but strength-wise wasn't there. And then later in the block, he started complaining of knee pain. And the only real change we made was the fact that we added in sumo deadlift to a secondary day. And he had even pointed out that his knees were hurting him on sumo deadlift as well. So that's not as common. Typically, people are going to experience knee pain. It's going to affect their squat. But in this case, the knee was bugging him during sumo. Now, if we look at squat programming, this has been pretty standard for us for a while now. We do kind of comp squats on this day, a top set, percent drop sets. We follow it with some leg press. And then on this secondary day, we do basically just a pause top set in the lower rep ranges. It's going to really challenge his technique, allows him to load the bar really heavy, kind of primes him in a sense, and just kind of carries him through these 3 days here. And then we follow that up basically with a pause back off set and then high bar squat. And the high bar really is just to save his elbows, save the shoulders, elbows, wrists, but also just does, in general, eases up on his back a little bit, which we found has been, helpful for us, because in the past we have had some back issues with managing fatigue with his low back. So that's kind of where his programming was last block. Now, moving into this new block, the problems we have at hand is, one, we need to get his knee pain under control. We currently are in a deload week right now, so I don't usually do full-on deload weeks often, but in this case we did run a full deload week because we came off a really big bench PR. It kind of made sense with the fact that we're dealing with some, substantial knee pain, I guess. The knee is bothering him. He also was complaining of just some lower back fatigue that was bothering him on this Monday session here. So we just decided to opt for a full deload, give him a chill week of training, kind of let him decompress. And that's where we find ourselves with this new training block. Now, just for video's sake, just to keep this video from getting overly long, I've actually written a majority of his block at this point. And And I'm just going to basically be going through, adding it to this sheet, just taking it from this other sheet, adding it over to this sheet, and then going through what my thought process was when writing the block, and then making any necessary changes. So for starters with squat, a couple things we want to see here is we need to get his knee pain under control, and you're going to see through some accessory work how I plan on doing that. And in general, I think we can just operate with some lower average intensities, which I think will help with just the general fatigue we were running into. So starting off with this primary day here, we're going to push a single. We ran a single last block. I think for data's sake, with making these adjustments, just leaving this top set as single, we can directly see how it's correlating compared to last block. I think sometimes when making changes, just keeping something very static that we can compare to from recent training blocks is huge. So in this case, we're going to leave the single in. We're going to do a triple. And I made these back downs pause sets of 4. The reason being it's going to, one, naturally lighten the load as I'm backing off an additional 7% on top of what I normally would back off. It's also just in general probably going to be a little bit easier on that knee. And the reason being is we're just not experiencing as much force in the bottom of like a stretch reflex. He's actually going to probably be slowing down coming into the bottom, and then spending some time paused down there, kind of in that isometric like contraction in the bottom. So that's kind of the reason for the pause squat, as well as pause squats just for him hugely benefit him. There's a reason we run it on his secondary day, like religiously. We run it all year round, all the time. And we found that when we take it out, we just kind of run into issues. So I know this isn't going to be a change that's going to hurt his squat at all. It may be something we probably aren't going to keep in very long, running pauses on this day, just because I do think he benefits a lot from running some comp squats. Just a full comp squat day on that primary day. But I think for now, just running some pause squats on this day is just going to be pretty beneficial for him. And then we see his secondary day, we have even more pause squats. This has been a staple on his secondary day. We run always have been running like this pause top set, a pause back off, and then a 2x6 high bar. Now with him, I like to keep this high bar day, or these high bar sets rather, percentage based. And the reason being is it just allows me to control his pace of progression. I actually have an informative page on my Instagram page, or sorry, an informative post on my Instagram page that details this strategy and this thought process. I believe it was posted back in January of last year, so it would have been about a year ago if anyone's interested in going to find that. But yes, percent-based sets allows me to just pace progression across the block and across multiple blocks. So that's been a staple in our programming. So this is kind of how I plan on setting up his squat specifically. And then as for squat accessories, just going to keep it pretty simple. I did change some stuff on his secondary day, which I'll get into, but his primary day, leg press, been the one we've been running, just that compound leg accessory movement. And he's been progressing on this a lot lately. We've kind of just been loading it up, it seems like. So we're going to kind of stick with that here. On this secondary day, though, we have been doing leg extensions. So we've been doing a pause leg extension, mostly, where we're just trying to really hold that pause at the top and then just kind of finishing off with some like AMRAP sets, I guess. Drop sets, rather. So we're going to keep some of that in there. I added in some pause tempo leg extensions. Again, easier on that knee. And some tempo dumbbell Bulgarian split squats, which will also be a little bit easier on the knee. So we're just, in general, just trying to get some blood flowing here. These are fairly low RPE just because I want this to be more of like a recovery exercise in a sense. And then this is kind of what we're looking for hypertrophy-wise. But we're seeing a tempo down. So it's a full speed up, a 1 second pause, and a tempo descent, which again I believe is going to really just help that knee, help build that tissue tolerance up a little bit. So that's where we're at with squat. Now looking at bench press, we're going to make very minimal changes, basically no changes at all, aside from bumping some reps around, just because last block went so well. So there's really no point in making sweeping adjustments programming wise. Just because, again, we have momentum and this structure clearly works really, really well. So starting off with this secondary day, we're going to run the exact same secondary day. We're not going to change anything. We're going to do a top triple and then some back off sets of 3 and 4. One back off set of 3 and then a 3x4. And We're going to follow it with some machine chest press. I did change the top set rep range just to give him a little something different to run. It's going to just be a little lighter, probably a little more volume technically with an added rep or two on average. But just in general, just something that's slightly different from a motivation standpoint, I think can be really helpful accessory-wise without making big changes. This tertiary day, zero changes at all. We are going to run a top single followed by a top set of 5 and a 2x5. Again, this structure here has led to that primary day feeling strong, so we just kind of want to keep doing it with making minimal changes. And then his secondary day, or sorry, his primary day, we're going to move away from the single and run a double just for one block, mostly because we just emptied the tank on a single, so there's kind of no point. I mean, we could theoretically run a singles again, but I think from a momentum standpoint, we can run the doubles, keep the positive momentum rolling, keep the positive, like the PRs coming possibly, then go back to singles next block. And what I'll likely do, move back to singles next block, and then possibly tick this triple down to a double. I think will just be a nice little experiment just to continue really pushing that low rep range theory we have, pushing the intensity that we've kind of seen has been working really, really well, especially on this day here, and just kind of see what happens. So kind of thinking ahead a little bit in terms of how we're going to periodize those top sets some. And then accessories, again, very small changes. Just change the rep set of the machine chest press, change the top set here from a set of 4 to a set of 3. Again, momentum, motivation-wise, like this can be a really good trick just to change that rep set or change the top set just a little bit. Gives people something new to run through, something motivation-wise, just a slightly different rep count that they can maybe push new PRs in or whatever. Probably won't go below a top triple on weighted dips. That's fairly low rep wise. We'll probably cycle back over to singles next block just because the triple is fairly low. But then we have that top set of 8 and the 2 sets of 8 to 10 just to get a lot of volume in. And then we got the tricep extensions here. Didn't touch those at all. Just going to kind of leave those be. And then lastly, we'll look at deadlift and accessories here after deadlift. So starting with deadlift. Primary day, we are going to run a single. The reason being is I really just want to, we haven't pushed singles yet with his sumo. So I want to just get some singles going. And this is kind of decide if this is something we want to continue to push long term as with sumo deadlift, or if we want to start circling back into maybe prioritizing conventional deadlift or even just kind of chopping sumo altogether, especially because we may be looking for a meet here soon. So we need to kind of make a decision what we're going to run through and run for a meet prep. So we have sumo here. We have a top set. We'll have some back offs. Again, you'll kind of see some RPEs. We're missing a lot here. This is just the basic skeleton microcycle design. We'll get into like how we're progressing across the block and the RPEs and all that here in a few minutes. But this day, we're keeping the same. We're just going to run sumo. We're going to make the top set a single as opposed to a double. Now, secondary day. We are going back to conventional on this day for a few reasons. One, it's going to be some good pulling volume. Now, I'm going to keep the RPE lower on this day than I did previously with him. And we have ascending sets as well. So you're going to see this RPE is going to ascend from the first set to the second set. And then we're going to do one back down set. And then we'll follow that up with some 45-degree hyper. And the reason behind the 45-degree hyper is it's going to be some more specific specific exercise to sumo deadlift. And that's going to be because it's going to train you very, very hard, the hamstrings and glutes in the shortened position, very, very hard. So it's going to carry over very nicely to sumo deadlift. This is pretty common. This actually was kind of like a little bit of a trend for a while, but I do still really like this for sumo pullers, running just some 45-degree hyper on that secondary day, getting some additional glute and hamstring stimulus. And it's typically not as fatiguing on that lower back as much. And then we have dumbbell RDL. I like to keep some hinge work in here for David. And we just kind of leave it tempo so that way we can actually push these hard. Otherwise, probably would honestly end up getting pretty maxed out on the dumbbells at his gym. So this allows us to kind of continue to push those 2 sets of 8 to 10. I'm going to just pull the reps down a tiny bit just to kind of force a little progression. So that's his deadlift training. And then lastly, we'll just kind of touch on the rest of his accessory work that we have here. So we have back work here. This can be upper back and lats. And then we have just general rowing. Going to be a little bit of lats, a little bit of upper back, and then bicep work as well. So here, not a ton of changes. I believe I might have ticked the reps down a little bit, just gave him a slightly longer range. And then from here, I did change to close grip lat pull down versus underhand lat pull down. Biggest reason is just something a little different. I'm usually not as opposed to cycling through some accessories with like the rows and stuff because they're less specific. So I'm okay with changing exercises more often than maybe I would with a like a leg press. Like I'm not just gonna pull leg press out for something else for no reason. I want to have some sort of a reason typically, unless the athlete really doesn't enjoy leg press. But in this case, or like whatever their the accessory is, weighted dips, hack squat, belt squat, whatever the case is. But in this case, it's less specific. It's more of a bodybuilding exercise. We're just trying to build some muscle. So I like to switch things up. I'm usually less picky about what the exercises are, more so trying to look at what we're targeting. So specifically here, target a lot of upper back, targeting a lot of lats here, and then this is just general back work that we're targeting here. It's going to be a typical neutral grip row. I kind of want a shoulder width, seated shoulder width, and we'll just add that in. And yeah, not a ton of changes here. Just trying to get the work in and get that volume in, the rowing in, and then bicep curls here. So mix in some AMRAPs, that sort of thing, but other than that, pretty simple. So that is the gist of his microcycle. That's just the entire microcycle designed out there for you guys, so you guys kind of have a good idea of what that looks like. And then I'm going to program the rest of his block across the weeks, and then touch base and kind of talk about whatever adjustments or changes I did make. Okay, and just to wrap things up, we'll go over the entire block in its entirety across weeks, really. So a couple things to note. I did tick his training max up just a little bit here, and the biggest reason for that is he was trending closer to that 455, 460 range. We hit 445 week 3 at like an RP7, 425 week 2 would have been about a 6 to 6.5. So I did bump that up a little bit just to really, it just pushes these back downs a little more. So you'll see those. They're going to take 10-pound jumps across the block. So they'll start at 275, they'll go 285, 295, 305, and then we take kind of these bigger jumps on his secondary day. We're pushing it some, but really starting to push it closer to week 2 through 4. Week 1, we kind of hold back just a little bit more. His primary squat day, we like to kind of start it heavyish, like in that RP6 range. I'm with him. I'm not starting that RP5 or less. I'm starting at RP6, and I'm letting it progress as adaptations occur, and just taking small RP jumps till we get to about an RP7. Then we'll kind of push RP8, knowing that this RP8 typically with most people is going to turn into a 9. So I'm not overly strict with the RP really on week 4. I'm kind of letting that. If the momentum's there, I'm letting people push those sessions if the momentum's there. But that's kind of our planned progression across the block for squat. Didn't change really the progression scheme we typically would use. It's mostly just through exercise selection and then accessory work that we're going to really tackle that knee issue and try to pick some momentum back up on squat. Bench press, like I said, very, very similar. The one thing I did do is I did drop this RP on this top set just a tiny bit week 1. Of this top set of 5, just because I don't think we need to push it much, like at all. Otherwise, we like to start this secondary day pretty light here, and then take some bigger jumps than maybe I normally would with somebody. Again, just based off the way he's built, as well as I like to naturally create some momentum with this day by starting it lighter, creating some like artificial momentum, just like forcing momentum, if you will. And then on this primary day, we're starting this heavier and it's staying heavy across the block, similar to how squat is. We're just going to watch it just get better week to week as adaptations occur. Now for deadlift, I like big jumps here with David. We'll start RP5 and ramp up to RP8. Typically find myself leaning more towards this type of bigger jumps week to week, full RPE jumps week to week with deadlift versus squat or bench. I'm typically kind of staying away from that. Maybe like a secondary squat day, I'd say this is more common. But yeah, with deadlift, I really like the big jumps, and I do like them with David here. Again, you almost get a sense of momentum going. You start very light, you take these big jumps week to week on the deadlift, and it kind of forces momentum in a sense. And then on this day here, Pretty big jumps on these ascending sets. Oftentimes you see ascending sets programmed like 1 RP jump. So we have about 1 to 2 RP jump here. It's a little bit bigger than normal. It's going to start off an RP 5 on the top set, and it's just going to take small jumps, 5 to 6, 6 to 7. I don't really want this getting heavy. In fact, I may even just say RP 6 here. I don't think these need to get heavy at all. We're trying to just get some good volume in, but we don't really need to load it super heavy. So I think with David here, we're going to run these ascending sets and just keep them very chill. And then the 45-degree hypers following that. So that is his programming completely. Again, the biggest things we're looking for is to continue to have success with bench press, continue to kind of rerun the structure we were running. With squat, we're looking to tackle that knee pain, get that knee pain under control. I'm not overly concerned with that. I think that's going to be something that's going to clear up. We're already seeing a few days into this deload, it's becoming much more manageable, which is obviously huge. And then with deadlift, we're just trying to find a structure that's going to allow him to deadlift without kind of re-aggravating that knee and getting some good volume pulling, as well as I wanted to mix in some conventional deadlift just in case we do end up having to go back to conventional next block or for a future meet prep or whatever. I want to leave some of that in there. So that's kind of why we made that programming change there. And then down here I just have all the 1 max calculators and all that stuff that I like to track. So that is his entire block programmed out. All right, so that's going to wrap up the video. Really just kind of wanted to get on here and make a video going over the step-by-step problem-solving process that coaches go through when writing new athletes, or not new athletes training, but athletes' new training blocks. So just kind of wanted to go over how to identify what went well, what did not go well, or maybe what could be improved upon, and then how to make those improvements within the athlete's training, within the programming side of things on the coach's end. So let me know if you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want to see more, and then if there's any comments or questions, leave them in the comment section down below.